Hey, it's Brad. So, accountability is interesting. Um, Accountability and responsibility are kind of complementary, but not quite the same thing. And neither one is the same as guilt and culpability. Um, I was watching a Bert Kreischer podcast with Daniel Sloss and two of my favorite comedians. Both kind of crude, but I mean, unapologetic because it's the character. It's their craft. Like they put together a well-crafted persona that is the style of their art and fits their community, and that is what people want them to be. And as long as it doesn't conflict with who they truly are, then it makes sense to be a good avenue for their creative outlet, aside from the fact that they're expert at doing so. But another thing that they have in common is, the way that they view accountability seems to be, instilled at a young age. Like Daniel was saying, when he would get in trouble as a kid, the first thing his mom would say, "What did you do?" And I mean, I say that to my kids. I remember my parents saying that to me, and it's never, or at least for my case, I don't know about him, never really intended as like, it's always your fault. It's more of, what was your part in this? Like, if you were just sitting there watching, getting over to a John Mulaney joke, his dad's like, why didn't you help your friend? When you were sitting there, you watched him get, jumped by some other kids. You were sitting on the bench. Why weren't you over there helping him? You could have been doing more. So it's, kind of a fine line on when there's awareness of a situation and you have the ability and opportunity to do something about it. How responsible are you for acting or not acting? And that's a whole different issue, or at least a whole nother level of the same accountability and things. But again, if you have like the commitment to the spirit of a thing, whether it's, your character and your community and your craft, and or just some message or, real mission you have, some vision, or like Bert said he heard from Dave Chappelle that they have, as comedians, an obligation to speak recklessly. I was thinking, well, that's a very Christian perspective. And in case it's not clear, I come from a Christian background, but all of the terms that I use, I generally try to put them in ways that, will make sense to all sides of things, because I will defend atheism to Christians, and I will defend theism to atheists. But I feel like when defending becomes confrontational, then you're not doing yourself or your side any service. And there you do have responsibility for how you handled, your points. I've never been in like a debate team or anything, so I don't know the structure and the rigors of those. But I'd imagine if more people were educated on the finer points of actual debate, then maybe we wouldn't just have a bunch of people screaming obscene comments all over the place. I mean, granted, we probably still would, but when they can't be held accountable for their actions, then that's the downside of the anonymity we get with the internet. But the issue comes with accountability for things that you didn't see coming or even couldn't have seen coming. Like, say you know that there's a best way to do something, but you don't realize the importance of doing it the right way. Like, for me, I was telling my daughter to do something the other day, and she didn't know why I was asking her to do it, so she thought it wasn't important. She was like, oh, well, whatever it is, I can just do it in a minute. And then, no, there was a time constraint. There was a real reason why I needed you to, go get the toy or whatever it was right now. I had to give it to somebody before they left. But it's doing things the right way, and that's, kind of a sideways example. But doing things the right way, like, again, back to the Bert Kreischer interview, he was saying, podcast, he was saying that he had an awkward email address, crude joke email address, not going to use his real name kind of thing. And then eventually his wife accidentally sent an email from that was supposed to be very above the board kind of thing. And so it's, there's no way that he could have known that would happen. And, being responsible for that being his account, it's on him that it happened, even though he had no control over that being the case. It's just, there's a measure of precaution that he didn't take, and it happened to bite him in the ass a little bit. And that's unfortunate, but again, not a huge deal. And he's the kind of guy that he can just roll with it, so that's great. But when there are things that you can't know the outcome, especially, again, like legacy-wise, things down the road, you don't know what's going to happen, how the dice are going to end up. The only thing you can be, the only standard you can be held to is, doing the best with what you have, playing the cards you're dealt. And it gets kind of a, back and forth, almost an AI game dynamic, being dealt the cards and playing them in response and getting more poker almost, or like dreams. Like, imagine if, it's not so clean cut as this, but imagine if your sensory input is your synapses firing, and then the conscious thought happens during the reuptake, when your chemicals, get reabsorbed back into your synapses so that you can fire them again. Well, imagine if, that's the way it breaks down. So then you have conscious control over the reuptake. Well, when your brain is trying to sift things out and all your chemicals are restoring back to normal while you're asleep, that would explain why you have conscious type thoughts, the exact same when you're dreaming as you do when you're awake, just much more immersive, and you don't have any other sensory input to disrupt what's happening. That's just one possible way of that working. But it's the sensations there. I mean, you're still responsible for your actions in your own dreams, even though you're the only one who could potentially even see them, barring some weirdness. But even if for nothing else, but that it has an impact on your mental state. It stays in your memory, it affects your psyche. The more you go through a pathway, the more it's, carved in, reinforced. So even if, atheistically, no God or anything else, no, judgment, you're still accountable to yourself, because you're going to remember things. And I don't know about you, but I don't want to have to regret things for the rest of my life. So I'd rather just do them the right way.